Hello everyone, welcome to the launch of our Call to Action and Advocacy Manifesto for an enforceable human right to a healthy environment. We hope this will be an interesting 45 minutes while you're eating your lunch and having a cuppa. And most of all, we hope it will motivate you to sign the petition to the Scottish Government, which we are launching today. But before I tell you more about this, I'd like to remind you that only the speakers are being recorded and that we're keeping everyone else on mute to get through the session on time. But there will be lots of events next year where the floor will be yours and we can get down to the nitty-gritty of what this right means for you and how best to shape it. So, as many of you know, I'm Shivali and I'm the Chief Officer for the Environmental Rights Centre for Scotland, or ERCS for short. And our vision is for Scotland where every person's right to live in a healthy environment is fully realised. And we will do this through increasing awareness of our existing environmental rights and providing you with free legal advice to help you use them. So if you have a query or a concern, please get in touch through our online form, which is on our website and also now in the chat. Emma's just going to put that in the chat for me. Thank you, Emma. But we also know that our environmental rights need to be improved so that we can use the law to help tackle the climate and nature emergencies and the causes and impacts of environmental damage in our communities. And this includes river pollution, polluting chemical plants and toxic land. So now I have a request for you. I'd like you to think about these words: the human right to a healthy environment. What does that mean for you? What immediately comes into your mind? What are your hopes and dreams for the health of our places and our planet? I'm going to ask you for 3 words that try to sum this up for you. And after I've introduced our speakers today, I'll ask you to put those 3 words in the chat, but not quite yet. So just think about them for the moment. So who are our speakers today? Well, it's with great pleasure that we have Mhairi Snowden, Director of the Rights Consortium Scotland, who will give a whistle-stop tour of the opportunity we have with the development of the Human Rights Scotland Bill to really advance human rights in Scotland, including the right to a healthy environment. Next year will be our chance to shape and inform this process. Then Clare Symonds, who is sitting next to me because we've had a couple of IT issues here, so she's going to be sharing the screen with me. Clare Symonds is Director of Planning Democracy and also one of our trustees, and will remind us of the huge barriers there are in trying to use the law and how unfair it is when folk muster up the courage and stamina to challenge bad planning proposals or decisions. And last but not least is Amelia Hanna, our Advocacy Officer, and she will give a summary of our key asks, which are detailed in our Advocacy Manifesto that she'll be putting a link in when she talks a little bit more about that. The manifesto explains the thinking behind the petition that we are launching today and that we would ask you to sign. And now the link to that petition is in the chat, and I can officially say the petition is now open. There's a fanfare, whatever. We'd like to get at least 100 signatures by the end of the day, so please share widely. The petition is asking for 4 things, which we will proactively work to deliver from the Scottish Government, but we also need to demonstrate public support for these 4 asks. And to summarise, they are: number 1, an enforceable right that means we can use it against public bodies and polluters in court. That these rights are protected to the highest regulatory standards so that we can enforce these standards. That we need to reduce the cost of going to court so it's affordable for all of us to take legal action as a last resort. And 4th and final one, we need a specialist environmental court which has the expertise to hear our concerns and is set up in a way which is less threatening and accessible as well as affordable for all of us. But Amelia will say far more about this when it's her turn to speak. So this is what ERCS will be working on to ensure an enforceable human right to a healthy environment. And now I'd like you all to write your 3 words on what this right means for you. So when you're ready, go for it in the chat. On you go. Great stuff. So we'll just wait to see what's coming up in the chat. Are people writing things? Great, they're coming through now. Brilliant, thank you. Keep on coming. Keep on going. And as you keep on writing those words, I'm going to let you know that we'll save this chat as our record of our combined vision of our right to a healthy environment. And we'll put that together in some way that we can share it with you all. So today is the next step in making this combined vision a reality. So with this ambition and hope, please sign the petition, and I hand over to Mhairi, and keep on writing your thoughts. Thank you. Over to you, Mhairi.
Thanks, Shivali, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for the invitation to be here today. It is a real pleasure and privilege. I recognise some faces, which is lovely, and some others I don't. So hello. So I am from the Rights Consortium Scotland, which is Scotland's civil society network to protect human rights. So I am, of course, you'll be pleased to know, going to talk about human rights, but I thought I'd start off with what will sound like a bit of a random question. But have you ever played Jenga? So I love a metaphor. I just love, that's the way my mind works. But have you ever played Jenga? So if you know the game, it's a lot of wooden blocks on top of each other, and you take turns to take one away at a time. And if you've ever played Jenga, you'll know that there are some blocks, usually towards the bottom, that you just can't move without the whole thing coming crashing down. Okay, maybe you played it on Christmas afternoons, actually. You'll know that there's a block that is crucial. And I think environmental rights are one of those blocks. They hold up our other human rights. And if our environmental rights are undermined, then all of our human rights are undermined. So I'm going to cut right to the chase, to the big neon light flashing point that I'm going to make today, is that a healthy environment is crucial, a crucial underpinning to all of our human rights. And if Scotland is serious about human rights, it absolutely needs to be serious about the right to a healthy environment. So some of you will know very well that Scotland is at an exciting time in developments around human rights law. So earlier this year, a bill to incorporate the UN CRC, so that's the Children's Rights Convention, it was passed unanimously by the Scottish Parliament, and when it's amended a bit, it will become law. And now the Scottish Government has committed to going further, to bringing home more of our international human rights. So adding on top of the Human Rights Act that we've had for about 20 years, the new law will also incorporate ICESCR, which is basically short for the Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which sounds complicated, but actually it's not. It's about things like the right to food, the right to adequate housing, the right to social security, to education, to health, and these rights are for all. And the bill will also incorporate group rights for women, for disabled people, and on race. And alongside all of these, the Scottish Government has committed, as Shiv said earlier, to put the right to a healthy environment into our law too. And this is just so right and so important. So human rights are very much about the basics that we need. They're not actually about luxuries or nice to haves, they're about the basics. And we all know that our environment around us, the environment that we live in, that we work in, that we play in, has a huge impact on these basics that we need to live. And in particular, we all of us here, all of us have the human right to the highest attainable level of physical and mental health. So this is part of ICESCR that I mentioned a moment ago, that will be put directly into Scots law. But how can you have this right to health if you don't have a healthy environment? You just need to think of the importance of clean air, of healthy food, of clean water, of green spaces, and just how fundamental those are to our health. And we know actually that environmental problems are found far more in areas of deprivation and disadvantage in Scotland, that those who are most affected are often those who are already marginalised or people who are most often ignored. And this is so often the case across human rights. And how can we say that Scotland will take children's human rights seriously unless we protect their right to a healthy environment? I don't know about you, but I just think, personally, if I think of children, I know that the impact of an unhealthy environment on them, then to realise how crucial this is. There are few things sadder, I think, than seeing pictures actually of children playing in the midst of rubbish. And it is notable actually that many of our strongest and loudest and most committed defenders of environmental rights are children and young people themselves. So it is absolutely right that this new human rights legal framework for Scotland will include the right to a healthy environment. And what's really important is that new law is not just about kind of nice principles or general considerations or best practice, but it's got to bring change, and it must lead to people being able to name and claim their rights. So first of all, the bill needs to include the specifics on environmental rights. It needs to include those minimum substantive levels of what it means to have, for example, clean air or healthy food. And secondly, it's got to be enforceable. So you should be able to take the right to a healthy environment and enforce it, ultimately in court if need be. Now, it is not that we want to end up with loads of court cases. That's not the plan or the intention, but we know that human rights and environmental rights don't come easy, and that there has got to be some way of making sure that the agreed intentions behind the legal rights work in practice. And we know that the potential of court enforcement means that these rights will be taken seriously, that there will be serious steps taken to prevent environmental problems, for example, in the first place. And we know too that courts just have a crucial role to play in protecting and advancing human rights realisation. Actually, I think a sensible and good government would absolutely welcome the potential to fully enforce rights through courts, because it means that actually any unintended consequences of law or policy can be checked. It means that there's clarity and certainty on law. It means that it's one of the ways to make sure that minority voices and serious issues are not ignored and swept under the carpet, but are actually dealt with for the good of everybody. And let's face it, unless your rights are enforceable, then they're basically not very effective as rights. So human rights are about power at the end of the day. They're about those who have power listening to those who don't. And they're about rebalancing that so that there's fair decisions that protect dignity. And enforceable rights is crucial for rebalancing that power. And that's true across human rights, and it is absolutely true for the right to a healthy environment as well. But what we also know, and that we'll hear more from Clare in a moment, is that right now access to justice, access to the courts is really costly, it's really lengthy, it's really difficult to actually take cases to court, particularly maybe because it's often the small voices against the big voices, whether that's in government or polluters. And we need to do more to make sure our justice system is fair, so the routes to getting justice is fair and that they are accessible. And when we spoke to about 450 people last year about the new human rights law to feed into the National Task Force on Human Rights, this is one of the most important points that was raised. It was raised in every conversation we had, that this new human rights legal framework has got to have teeth, and that means it's got to actually, you've got to actually be able to bring cases, actually practically, realistically, bring cases and enforce your rights. And this absolutely means that the extortionate costs to take strategic cases to court must be addressed. So things like, as it says in the advocacy plan, it says we've got to be able to end court fees, we've got to have legal aid for strategic cases. Because how good would it be if Scotland's justice system wasn't stacked against those who are marginalised or don't have money, but actually justice on human rights, including on the right to healthy environment, is completely and actually accessible, no matter who you are, and no matter how much money you have in the bank. So I wholeheartedly support the Environmental Rights Centre's petition. I know we're going to hear more of the details on the advocacy plan from Amelia later on. I think they've done a brilliant job of pinpointing exactly what is needed and articulating it really clearly, because I think this is a really crucial moment for Scotland to get this right. So we've already added our support as a consortium to that petition and the call for action. I hope that you can too. So thank you for listening. I hope that was interesting in some way. And I now want to hand over to Clare Symonds, who is both a trustee of the Environmental Rights Centre for Scotland, and she's also the Director of Planning Democracy. So Clare, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mhairi, and thank you, ERCS, for inviting me to be part of this event, which is really exciting. It's very close to my heart. It's one of the reasons I supported ERCS by becoming a trustee. So thank you very much for being here. Planning Democracy, well, for those of you who don't know us, we're a grassroots organisation and we campaign for a fairer planning system in Scotland. And we believe in the democratic control of land and the way it's developed. So to us, planning is not just about a technical process of drawing up development plans and granting permission to build. It's about aspirations for a better future so that we can live in places that fulfill everyone's needs while protecting and enhancing the environment we live in. Now, we work closely with people all over the country. We often listen to people's experiences of planning. We visit them when we can, and we write up case studies. We've got about 70 of them at the moment that describe people's experience of engaging in this often complex and often alienating world of planning. But we recognise that not everyone's lives revolve around planning, as ours do. People rarely wake up thinking, oh, I'm going to try and influence my local development plan today. Most people first realise what planning is all about and the impact of planning decisions when an unwanted development is proposed near them. It's usually then that they get in touch with us. Now, we recognise that people often feel utterly baffled. It can be very lonely and confusing, and some people are even fearful of engaging in the bureaucratic and sadly too often unfriendly world of planning. Many people tell us they feel marginalised and isolated by what is supposed to be a democratic system where people's voices are able to influence planning decisions. So we have set up a peer support network, which is a group of people who have had a lot of experience of planning. Often they're community councillors or people who live in areas with heavy development pressures. Now, these kind souls help others to navigate the system, providing practical help and tips, but more importantly, providing emotional support and empathy. And this is utterly invaluable. Take, for example, Jane. Now, Jane's a retired nurse who had to give up her career because of mental health difficulties. She contacted us saying that she had heard about a proposal to build 200 houses near her. Now, we were able to go and visit her and the site after lockdown. She found that hugely reassuring. As we walked around the wooded site where the development is proposed, she told us it had been her lifeline during lockdown. There are various proposals for housing close to Jane. In all, they total 6,009 houses proposed around her area. So this green space will be a vital lung for anyone living in this hugely developed area. There was a children's play park in the next again street from her house, and I asked whether she used that, but it was full of noisy kids and not the natural space she needed to restore her mental energies. It was in fact there because 33 houses had previously been demolished 20 years ago due to the underlying mine voids causing dangerous subsidence. So Jane has zero knowledge of planning. I suggested she contacted her community council for a bit of support, but it turned out she had no idea what a community council was And in fact, she was banging on the door of a now closed up local community centre and not getting an answer. You know, Jane has been busy nursing for many years. 12-hour shifts over 30 years takes its toll. She has a sick husband and has just not had the time to engage in other civic areas of life, although she cares for a number of her elderly neighbours. So all this was totally new to her. The developer, on the other hand, knows the system well and is basically chancing their arm with this proposal, knowing that the system is balanced in their favour. This site is not allocated in the local development plan. It contravenes many local planning policies, not to mention the health and safety risks of mine voids in the area. But this doesn't stop the developer with an eye on his profit margin. However, together with our amazing peer supporters, Jane ended up writing a really robust, actually it was a slightly epic objection, detailing the problems and citing plan policies and standards. Jane likened her situation to a David and Goliath battle, only now with the support she had, she was armed with a cannon rather than a slingshot. But this is likely to be the start of her planning battle. The developer is also pushing to get this site into the development plan, so Jane needs to respond to that consultation next year too. If the application for permission is rejected, the developer will likely appeal, because they can, as will all the other developers putting in proposals for houses, those 6,000 houses around her. This option is not open to Jane, as communities are not granted the same rights as developers and have no right of appeal. The imbalance in the system is nauseatingly and grossly unjust. So to further illustrate you and to show what is quite possibly the likely next stage for Jane, I want to show you a film that we made with a group of residents in Glasgow, who are slightly better resourced than Jane, but still facing an immense hurdle, that of challenging a planning decision in a court of law. And this bit is probably the most relevant piece to us today. So we've made this film to help them raise money and to help illustrate the huge imbalance in the system. And I'd like to thank Georgios, who helped us make the film with a really low cost budget. I heartily recommend this budding filmmaker if anyone wants to pay him properly. But the film really speaks for itself. In this case, the application was refused, but the developer appealed successfully. So without further ado, thank you for inviting me, and I'd like you to watch this 3-minute film. Thanks.
On September the 7th this year, the local review committee in Glasgow gave permission for luxury homes to be built on this site.
One of the last pieces of green space in this beautiful historic place, and they want to destroy all that.
This is a decision that has completely shocked and flummoxed the local community.
100 objections, none of them were taken into account when that decision was made.
4 key reports that are supposed to be submitted by council policy were not available.
The Planning Authority did not request a statement of energy. Would we normally? Is that not one of our kind of ticky box type questions that we would be asking?
They obviously hadn't prepared for the hearing.
The information that I have read, there is no trees, or there's no mature trees.
The reasons they gave were not based on any planning reasons or exceptions to the Green Belt.
I think as a committee we've got to be pragmatic and flexible.
The committee seemed to have no knowledge of their own council's policies.
Right, that's kind of still new to me, sorry.
It breaks my heart that things like this are being allowed to happen.
The Community Council has spent £5,500 on legal fees, and all that's got us is having the case lodged in the Court of Session. To actually go to court and fight the case is going to cost substantially more, and we were quoted figures of £50,000 to £75,000.
It's almost like a David versus Goliath fight, really.
We're not going to sit down and let them get away with this.
The system isn't working and that it needs to change.
If the only way of challenging decisions is having to raise huge sums of money to fight them in the courts, this is not good for communities. We're hoping our experience will help other communities and will expose some of the poor quality decision making that's taking place in local review committees. We are struggling at the moment to overcome the difficulties in challenging it, because if we lost, we would be responsible not only for our own costs but for the costs of the council and the developers, plus the costs of the court itself. So we're relying on people seeing the injustice and joining us in our fight and supporting us by donating some money to our fighting fund.
Help us to save this. Look at it.
Save our fields! Save our fields!
Thank you, Claire, for that really powerful presentation and video. I'm going to pick up now. Hello, everyone. I'm Emilia. I'm the Advocacy Officer for the Environmental Rights Centre for Scotland. And it is great to be introducing our Advocacy Manifesto and our petition for an enforceable human right to a healthy environment today. This has been a labour of love, a real team effort from people in ERCS and from many of you here. So thank you to everybody who has fed in with your legal knowledge, your policy insights, photos, and stories about what the human right to a healthy environment means to you. I'm going to say a few words about the petition and the Advocacy Manifesto that supports it. I'm going to cover why we've chosen to launch the petition now, why we've chosen the wording that we have for it, and what you can do to support it. So let's get cracking. So the first point I want to make is that we're launching the petition now because there are big opportunities in 2022 to make progress towards the human right to a healthy environment in Scotland. As Mhairi outlined, the Scottish Government will consult for a new human rights bill next year. And this bill will bring in so many new rights, including the human right to a healthy environment. The government will also be consulting on whether to set up an environmental court at some point before spring 2023. These are two important opportunities that we cannot afford to miss. We know that environmental damage and systemic injustice are flip sides of the same coin, as Mhairi and Claire have outlined already so clearly. It's clear that we need system change. And I know that many of us here feel cynical sometimes and maybe a bit burned out from trying to protect the environment. But these opportunities in 2022 definitely give me a glimmer of hope. The task now is to show that there is support for getting the foundations of the right to a healthy environment strong, so that when it comes, it will make a difference, it will lead to system change and work for people and the environment. Getting these foundations right is exactly what our petition seeks to do. So that brings me to my second point. The petition that we're launching today and the Advocacy Manifesto that sits behind it set out 4 key features that we and others have identified as being essential foundations to get the right to a healthy environment to work in practice. So I'm going to talk through each feature one by one. Feature 1, the right needs to be enforceable, with a duty on public bodies and polluters to respect it at all times and with remedies for environmental damage. All too frequently, we see commitment to climate action and environmental protection on one hand, and policies or developments that harm the environment on the other. A right to a healthy environment must give us a legal basis to have accountability, and it has to be enforceable against public bodies, but also against polluters. And we've used this as a generic term to refer to privatized bodies that have public responsibilities, but also to large business enterprises that damage the environment. And I'm thinking of the Mhairi of Scotland here. We need accountability. Feature 2, we need a strong definition for what a healthy environment actually means. 2 months ago, the UN Human Rights Council adopted a resolution recognizing the human right to a healthy environment. And that resolution defines a healthy environment according to 6 key features: clean air, a safe climate, safe, clean water, healthy and sustainably produced food, non-toxic environments in which to live, work, study and play, and healthy biodiversity and ecosystems. Advisors to the Scottish Government have offered this definition, and this is great. Because, for example, imagine if a new motorway were proposed that would worsen air pollution in an area where air pollution levels are already illegal. With this right and with this definition, we would be able to say, hold on, that is against the right to a healthy environment because it's compromising people's ability to breathe clean air. So that UN definition with those features are the right basis. But to be really strong, the next task will be to define them further and according to the highest possible environmental standards. And that's what we're calling for in our petition. Feature 3, it must become affordable for all of us to uphold environmental laws in a court or tribunal. As we've heard already, this is so important because otherwise the right will be enforceable in theory only and not in practice. We must be empowered to be in practice the guardians and custodians of our environment. But as we've heard, in Scotland, it costs hundreds of thousands of pounds sometimes to use the legal system to challenge projects, developments, or policies that could potentially harm the environment and be in breach of environmental law. We've heard how shattering this can be for communities, and it puts the burden on the people who are at the sharpest end of environmental damage to foot the bill for trying to protect it. Obviously, it leads to poorer environmental outcomes too. But also, this situation is in breach of the International Human Rights and Environmental Law Treaty that many of you will know about, the Aarhus Convention. Scotland's legal system has been found 10 times now to be in breach of that convention. So the situation has to change. The Aarhus Convention's governing institutions have said as much 2 months ago. They are calling for an urgent plan of action by the middle of next year. And the third ask of our petition underscores the need for action. Our manifesto goes into more detail about how this can be done by reforming legal aid, court fees, and changing the loser pays rule. So please do check out our manifesto for more information on this. Feature 4, for the human right to a healthy environment to really be transformative, Scotland needs a specialist environmental court or tribunal to uphold environmental law and the right to a healthy environment. That court or tribunal must be affordable and accessible for everyone. It must be fair, timely, and effective. There has been a recent explosion of environmental courts worldwide, with nearly 1,500 across the globe. There are so many reasons why we need an environmental court in Scotland, but I only have time to tell you about 2 reasons. So firstly, the current main legal route that we have to challenge environmental decisions or policies is judicial review. But that process doesn't allow for full consideration of the substance of whether environmental laws were violated. The courts can only really look at whether the right steps were followed in reaching the decision. So they look at process rather than the meat and bones of the environmental merits of the case. So this is a massive shortcoming, and it might even be another breach of the Aarhus Convention. The governing institutions are looking into that at the moment. And another reason why we need an environmental court or tribunal is that to properly resolve environmental issues, we need to bring legal and scientific experts together under one roof and in one forum. Judges in Scotland are not exposed to environmental disputes very often. It might be years from one environmental case to the next. And that's partly because environmental disputes happen in lots of different legal forums, the Court of Session, the Land Court, the Sheriff Courts, the Lands Tribunal. With the stakes so high for the environment, there is a need for an efficient system that pulls resources and expertise together, bringing judges and experts together in a way that is accessible to the public. The right kind of environmental court or tribunal would be a comprehensive way of bringing Scotland's legal system into step with its obligations to the environment and on human rights law. So these 4 features, an enforceable right with a strong definition of a healthy environment that is affordable to enforce with a specialist environmental court or tribunal. These are the foundations of a right to a healthy environment that could make a difference, and these are the basis of our petition. They're detailed with a lot more of the technical recommendations about how to make them a reality in our Advocacy Manifesto. And if you want even more detail, our Advocacy Manifesto links to further briefings and reports, including our brilliant report on the need for an environmental court or tribunal. So please do check that out. I'm going to finish off now by saying, as you've already heard today, but I'll give it a last plug, please support the petition if you can. It's open to sign on by organisations and individuals, and we're really happy to already have 16 organisations signed up, so thank you so much. We want to hear from more. University clubs, community councils, community groups, NGOs, everybody has a stake in this work. So please sign the petition. Get your organisation to sign the petition if you can. We at ERCS have a distribution list that's tiny because we're still pretty new on the scene. So please, if you can, consider sharing the petition through your distribution lists as a priority at any point in 2022. Get in touch with us if you are willing to do so, and we can organise around this. We will be highlighting the petition to the government throughout 2022 with a view to handing it in ahead of the consultation for an environmental court towards the end of the year. It's a constructive petition. It's about working to change the law to strengthen our rights for system change. Starting today, we want to reach as many organisations and as many individuals across Scotland as we possibly can, so that we can spread the word through 2022, because the time really is now. So thank you so much for coming, for engaging and for listening. And I'm going to hand over back to Shivali now. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. Brilliant summary of our work. Thank you so much for that. And Mhairi, thank you for that energising, motivating whistle-stop tour on human rights and the fact that environmental rights underpin all our other human rights. Thank you for making that such a clear message. And Claire and everybody that worked on that film, please give them our thanks. So that's almost our 45 minutes up. I know we've said it a few times, but now really is the time to act and show the government that you support making our environmental human rights work for our health and our planet. You can show your support by doing the petition. As Amelia says, you can get in touch, you can spread the word. If you would like us to come and talk to any group about this, we're very happy to do that as well, and we can set up sessions in the new year. But if you still need persuading on signing the petition, the link is in the chat. We have the delight and honour to play a very special message from Professor David Boyd, UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights and the Environment. Emma, if you could play the film.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Boyd, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment. I'm delighted to be supporting the outstanding work of the Environmental Rights Centre for Scotland. There can be no question that the time has come for the recognition and implementation of the right to a healthy environment. On October 8th, 2021, the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted a pioneering resolution recognizing for the first time that everyone in the world should enjoy this basic human right. The right to a healthy environment includes clean air, safe and sufficient water, healthy and sustainably produced food, a safe climate, healthy ecosystems and biodiversity, and non-toxic environments where people can live, work, study, and play. The right to a healthy environment also comes with a toolbox of participation rights, including access to information, public participation in decision-making, and critically, access to justice where people's rights are being threatened or violated. So I encourage everyone to take a moment and sign the petition so that Scotland can become one of the 150 plus countries in the world where the right to a healthy environment is making a difference in people's lives. Thank you very much and take care.
Well, there you go. If he said it, it must be true. I've seen something in the chat about why does the number not come up immediately when you sign the petition. Just to let you know, it's we have to go through a verification process. So by tomorrow morning, we would have posted up the full number from the end of today. So keep on signing. It's not that it's going into nowhere. It's just our verification process, it's called. Okay, well, that's all from us for now. We will be back in touch soon. And we wish you a peaceful and joyful festive break. Thank you.